Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this YouTube channel, I am just providing the technical information for interview purpose, and there are some important questions in different sections. So I am starting from Hibernate. So what are the important questions in Hibernate? You can get to know from me. And so before starting, I am requesting all of you to kindly like, subscribe my channel so that you can view all important aspects of Hibernate questions. So let's starting. I'm just starting my Hibernate. From Hibernate, this interview series from Hibernate. So there are some very important questions which is important for all peoples who are in experience range from 5 years, 10 years, uh, or even they are just started for the interviews. So there are very important questions the people ask to interview panel ask to the to the peoples, and they are even forget to just summarize. So I just take this video series so that you can just have some reminder about these questions before going to the interview. This will help you a lot for your interview. So let's start from our first question in Hibernate. What is ORM in Hibernate? So ORM basically is object relationship mapping. So this is a mapping tool pattern. So one word we should remember, so that in interview we will not humble, and in interview we will be straight away there will be one word, so we can recall our programmings and other stuffs. So ORM stands for object relationship mapping, and this is a mapping pattern basically, because object relationship mapping, so it's a mapping pattern. So mainly used for converting data stored in relational database. This is a relational database. So whatever data is stored in relational database, उसको ये क्या करेगा, that data it will convert into an object, and that particular object will be used for retrieving, creation and manipulation. So that is the Hibernate ORM tool do. So Hibernate ORM stands basically for object relationship mapping, and this is mapping tool pattern mainly used for converting data stored in relational database as an object using object relationship mapping constructs, and this tool help to generally simplify data retrieval, creation and manipulation. Now what are the advantages of Hibernate over JDBC? The second very important question that is asked in interview. So the first advantages of Hibernate over JDBC is like database independent. So Hibernate code is database independent because you don't need to change SQL queries, right? So Hibernate code is database independent because you don't need to change the SQL queries when you change database like MySQL, Oracle. Hence it is easy to migrate from one database to another database. So that is basically typical thing in JDBC, like we have to change the driver, but here we don't need to do that. Hibernate code just database independent because you just need to change the configuration file, and then it will be replicate to all your Hibernate codes. You don't need to change anywhere explicitly in the code because code is not embedded in your basically there's no hard coding embedded in the code, so there will be very easy for you to change the database. Like if you are using MySQL database and you have to change in Oracle or vice versa, so it is very easy to migrate into the new database. It is achieved by using dialect, which is like org Hibernate dialect MySQL. So property in your XML file, or you can use the config as well. Are you using Spring Boot, then you can use the config as well, and you can just define your what database you wanted to use in that particular config. And in your properties file, it will load the configuration from your property file. The database you wanted to switch, it will load from your properties file. Now the second importance is reduce repeatable code. So Hibernate reduce the amount of repeatable line of code which you can often find in your JDBC. You are understanding, like you are what you are using in JDBC, like connection create, then creating the executing the query, result set, and then other stuff. So this kind of executable code one time, like Hibernate reduce the many lines of codes which which you are doing in JDBC, and which are for your understanding. And like we are creating Hibernate SessionFactory object once and set all connections provided by it again and again. Like we have to create one SessionFactory object, and whenever we needed, it will get we get session from our object. So there are two properties of session. I already I already told you session and SessionFactory. So session is like a short-lived object. SessionFactory is a long-lived object. Session object, like we can have if we have a session object, then we have like very short-lived object for entity, that we can say the entity level object, and once we session.close, that object will destroy. So we have to manage the thread there. So that is a different question. So but SessionFactory is a lifelong object. So once it is created, so it will be available for all JDBC connection for the database, and your session object will get from that particular SessionFactory. Got it? So that is basically database independent. First is benefit of Hibernate using. The second benefit is a reduce or repeatable code. Third is lazy loading. Lazy loading is what, if you are now Hibernate 3, there is a default object or default to using as a lazy loaded, and because if you are using in a association and multiple objects, so once your object is loaded, their associated entries is also loaded. If you use lazy loading as a false, then it will be associated object will be automatically loaded with your parent object. But if you lazy loading is true, then it means that associated object will not be loaded with your parent object until you want to explicitly retrieve it. So we can use lazy loading. So we can have a lazy loading using Hibernate. Consider example when we are a list of users in the user table. Identify the identity proof document uploaded by the user are stored in identity proof table, and user has one to many relationship with the identity proof. In this case, user is parent class, identity proof is a child class. So yeah, this is, suppose we can say here like I can say this is a user and this is an identity proof. Alright, so user is a class and identity proof is a class. So identity proof document uploaded by the user are stored. Okay, so the user has one to many relationship. So user has a list of identity proof, right? So we can say list, and then we have a something like then we can have @ one to many relationship. Okay, I can tell you with some example. Let me drag to that example. Yes, give me 1 second. Alright. See, this is an example one to many like this. So we have a entity called vendor payment table, and we have like a one to many relationship like here. See this. So private list vendor payment detail. So this is a vendor payment table where the list of vendor payment detail. So it having the vendor payment detail list. So what is the one to many relationship? @one to many. We have annotated with @one to many. Fetch type is either we can give it the lazy loaded or we can give it to the eager. So it's mapped by vendor payment ID in vendor payment detail table. So whenever your vendor payment table will be loaded, this vendor payment detail will also be loaded. Sorry. So cascade is equal to cascade type all and orphan removable trues. I will tell you about the cascading. Don't worry. Now just you have to keep in your mind, like when cascade type all, so all the operations like merge, update, that operation when with the parent operation will also perform in the child entity as well. So this is a one to many relationship. Like entity table is vendor payment table name, and we have a one to many relationship with vendor payment detail table. So this is a fetch type is eager, mapped by vendor payment ID and cascade type all. So orphan removal is true. So this is the best example I have tell you. So I just tell you about the lazy loading, and I hope you understood the lazy loading concept. I just tell you the example as well. So the third benefit, the first benefit I told you, like I have told you the first benefit of using Hibernate. You can using that that database independently. You can have multiple database. You have choice. You just have to change the properties file and reduce the repeatable code. Second benefit, you can use the benefit of lazy loading. You can use avoid try catch block. So JDBC, what you throw SQL exception always, right, which is checked exception. So you will be writing try catch blocks in your code. Hibernate handle this by you converting JDBC exceptions to unchecked exceptions. तो Hibernate में क्या होता है, जो what will happen, जो JDBC exception जो है, that was the checked exception, because only SQL exception was. So Hibernate convert that JDBC exception to unchecked exception. So therefore you you don't need to waste your time implementing the try catch block. So you have the unchecked exception, and you have there, like whenever you have operation, you can have that kind of call in Hibernate, and then you can get it in catch block. So multiple try catch will not needed. It will cascade in your parent level. Now association, it is very easy to create association between the tables. I already tell you one to many, many to one. The relationship in Hibernate is very easy. Now caching is very important in Hibernate. Caching mechanism, that is a benefit of Hibernate over JDBC. So yeah, Hibernate use the caching. So caching is Hibernate provides a caching mechanism which help reduce the number of hits, such as, so suppose you have a table which is having associations, and you just retrieve a data. So the similar kind of data you want again and again. So what you will do? So same parameter, similar data, you will use query cache. So this kind of different level of cache Hibernate uses, like session caching and query caching. So this Hibernate store the object in session which is available until the transaction is active. So when a particular query is executed repeatedly, the value stored in session is used. So whatever value stored, it's because Hibernate using the session, so whatever the value in session, it will be used. I will tell you about the query caching in detail. Now another benefit is object mapping, connection pooling. So Hibernate supports the inheritance, association, collection. So these are the very benefits of Hibernate. So I just tell you, interviewer asked definitely these questions for all experienced candidate and fresher candidates. So it depends on the candidates how they answer, but if you give the correct answer and complete answer, then interviewer will be definitely impressed with you. Number third question, what are the some of the important interfaces of Hibernate framework? So important interfaces क्या हैं Hibernate framework के? So these are the important interfaces like configuration, SessionFactory, session, criteria, query and transaction. We are using, if you are using Hibernate, you just know, you know these interfaces. So Hibernate interfaces are like the configuration, SessionFactory, session, criteria, query and transaction. So this is just a video for you all who wanted to repeat their knowledge. And for the all who are fresher, who don't know configuration, SessionFactory, session, criteria, query, transaction, they can comment and I will tell them on separate video what all in detail. So session object in Hibernate. What is a session object in Hibernate? Session object is an object that maintain the connection between the Java object application and database. So what is that? It is a persistent object. So database, whatever the database object is having all details about the database. So it can convert the data object to persistent object. So the session will having that particular object. So once you have a session for your short goals, like session is having in life cycle, and once the session will close, all that object will be and you will lose that data. So session has method of storing, retrieving, modifying, deleting data. So these are the method like persist, load, get, update, delete. These are the method in session. So session.load, session.persist, session.get, session.update, session.delete. So essentially the So session factory say where you get the session, you get the session from the session factory. So what is the difference between session and session factory? So session is a short-lived object and session factory is a long object. So like one database, one session factory, and one session factory has a multiple sessions for individual goals of yours. Like you are doing multiple operations in a database, retrieve, delete, and update. So once you have used session, and once you have a get current session, or you just open a new session, that session object will be associated with that particular object, and once you do operation, session close, all of the session object will be closed. So that's it. The session life is very short. Now session factory. So session factory is a current instance of session, and as I already told, session factory always gives session. So session factory has one instance for an application, and session have multiple instance for a session factory. So from session factory, session will originate, and factory class that give a session object based on the configuration parameter. In order to good practice, application generally has a single instance of session factory. One application has one single session factory. I have already told you. This will be crystal clear to you. Examiner will confuse you. Don't confuse. Session factory will be one per database or one per application, and it is the internal state of session factory which includes metadata about ORM, and once the instance is created, it cannot be changed. This also provides a facility to get information like statistics, metadata related to class, query, execution, etc. So it holds secondary level cache. It also holds secondary level cache data if enabled. So secondary level cache if enabled, then it is also hold the secondary level of cache. What do you think about the session being a thread safe object? No, session is not a thread safe object. I already told you, when you open the session, it's your responsibility to close the session so that your application will not club with other session. So can you explain what is the lazy loading in Hibernate? I already explained you. Hibernate 3 by default lazy loading is enabled. Lazy loading it means that usually improve the application performance. So the parent class is loaded, the child class will not, or associated class will not be loaded if lazy loaded is true. This is the question. First level cache, second level cache, what difference क्या है? What is the difference between first level cache, second level cache? This is very important question. This is a first level cache is a local session object and cannot be shared between the multiple session because it is not thread safe. I already told you in previous question. So it is, you should be very clear, like first level cache, there is no local session object and cannot be shared between the multiple sessions. Secondary level cache, this cache is maintained at the session factory level and shared among the session of Hibernate. The cache is enabled by default. First level cache by default enabled होता है, and there is no way of disable it. You can just open and destroy the session. And secondary level cache is disabled by default, but we can enable it throughout our configuration. We can enable in our configuration. That's a very important thing. Just the cache about the first level cache and secondary level cache is enabled by default. In first level cache is enabled by default. Secondary level cache is disabled by default. First level cache is available only until the session is open. Once the session is closed, first level cache is closed, destroyed. This is the life cycle of session. Like secondary level cache is available throughout the application life cycle, and it is only destroyed and recreated when an application is restarted. So secondary level cache तभी destroy होगा जब application restart होगी आपकी. What can you tell about Hibernate configuration file? So Hibernate configuration file or hibernate.cfg.xml file. What is the hibernate.cfg.xml file? If you are using annotation, then you don't have to write this hibernate.cfg XML file. So it is a configuration file in Hibernate. By default, the file is placed under the source main resources folder. So this is having the configuration file with the detail of database configuration, session related configurations. These all details are in Hibernate configuration file. So if you are using, so Hibernate facilitate providing the configuration either in XML file, Hibernate cfg.xml, or if you are using annotation, then Hibernate properties file. So the file is used to define the below information. The one is the driver class name, URL, username, password. But if you are using the Spring Boot project or JPA, so then you have all the properties file. You have these configuration, these details, these properties you can define in your application.properties file. Yeah, development.properties file, application dev, application stage, application prod.properties file, or you can use define in YAML files. So that will be used by your @ configuration in your project. So database connection, there must be one configuration for each database used in application. Suppose if you want to use 2 databases, then there must be 2 configuration files, right? But if you are using that JPA, then you have @ configuration class. So and that particular @ configuration you can define your databases. So if you can use two different database configuration, you can define there. So Hibernate properties, dilate, source, SQL, secondary level cache mapping file, right? How do you create an immutable class in Hibernate? Immutable class Hibernate creation, we can just making mutable is equal to false. So when mutable is false, it will become immutable. या फिर we can use @ immutable annotation. Is Hibernate prone to SQL injections attack? So SQL injection attack is a serious vulnerability in terms of web security. Yes, this is very serious vulnerability in terms of security. Attacker can interfere with the queries made by an application, website, and database, therefore thereby allowing the attacker to view the sensitive data and generally irreversible. It can also give attacker modify, remove data, resulting in damages of application's behavior. So Hibernate does not provide SQL injection immunity. So Hibernate means SQL is not exposed at browser level, so it definitely does not provide the SQL injection. However, the following good practice avoid SQL injection attacks. It always advisable to follow any of the below options. Incorporate the prepared statement, that is parameterized queries. Use parameterized queries. Use store procedures. Ensure data sanity by doing input validations. So always do this to escape from SQL injection.